Good afternoon. I'm Joe Shaw. I'm the executive editor of the Southampton Press, and I want to thank you all for coming out today to the Southampton Village debate that we are co-sponsoring with the Southampton Association here at the Southampton Arts Center. And I want to just start off by thanking both of those organizations for helping us out in setting this up. This is going to be, we're continuing with a format that we've been experimenting with for the last couple of years, and we think it's worked really well, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from constituents and candidates alike. And it's going to be a roundtable conversation with the candidates for Southampton Village government this year, who I will introduce in a moment. And it isn't going to be timed. There isn't going to be any formal structure to how we do this. It really is going to be a roundtable conversation. So keep that in mind as we go forward. It's designed to be a conversation rather than a debate per se. So let me introduce the candidates, and I want to make clear that the candidates to my left are the two candidates for Southampton Village Mayor. That would be Mr. Michael Irving, who is the incumbent, who's directly to my left, and his challenger, Jesse Warren, who's on the end. To my right are the three candidates for Southampton Village Trustee. The village board candidates, you will pick two of the three. And they are, starting to my right, Andrew Polaro, Mark Parrish, and Joe McLaughlin. Okay, we're going to start by giving each of the candidates 2 minutes to introduce themselves very briefly. 2 minutes is sort of a loose timing schedule, but we'll let Mr. Warren start us off with an introduction.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. My name is Jesse Warren, and I'm running for mayor of Southampton Village. I'm running because I believe Southampton Village needs new energy and an updated vision for 2019 and for the next decade. I'm running because as a business owner for the last decade, I hate to see our stores closed, and I'd like to see and bring renewed vibrancy back to our village. I'd love to see open space and green space and prosperity. I'm running because I'd love to see and demand to see a clean Lake Agawam, not a slow, perennial, four-step plan that doesn't seem to be working. I'd like action and a sense of urgency. And I'm running because I believe we deserve a government and a local government that works for everybody, not depending on what street you live on or not depending on where you're from, but a government that's open and accessible to everyone. And I'd love to change the way government works in Southampton Village. And I believe that we can make that possible on June 21st on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Irving?
First, I'd like to thank SAC. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank the Southampton Press for this opportunity to debate some critical issues in the village. I am a third-generation family member in the Southampton Village. Southampton Village and the community surrounding it has been a major part of my life. I've been here all my life. I've raised children here. I have grandchildren in the school system. It's imperative to me to keep Southampton as bold and clean and functionable as it has been in the past. And I expect to do that with all your cooperation and all your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Polaro?
Good afternoon, everyone. I also would like to thank the Southampton Association, Southampton Press, the Arts Center for hosting us this evening. Thank you, Joe, for your time as well. Thank you, other candidates, too. I am 49 years old, have lived in Southampton since I was 5. I am proud to call Southampton home, even when I wasn't living here and away for education and overseas for a little bit of time as well. I've always considered Southampton home. I loved coming back here. The smell of the salt air when I arrived back in Southampton, I knew I was home and I started to relax. I would like to give back to the village that has meant so much to me for these last 45 years. I'm excited at the opportunity to be in this position and running for village trustee. I think it's very important that we work on the community itself, because this community is one that is so strong. And I'd like to make it even stronger over the next few years. And I think there are many different ways to go about it, and I'm sure that we will get into those positions and stuff over the next hour and a half. So I want to keep this brief, and thank you all for being here, and I look forward to working with all of you and working with the other candidates and the mayor, should I be lucky enough to be elected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parrish?
Good evening, everybody. Mark Parrish. Thank you to Joe, SAC, the Southampton Press, and everybody else involved in helping get this going. Mark Parrish, 49 years old, 48, and I'm born and raised in Southampton Village. I own a house in the village that I was raised in. I'm raising my children there. I have two. They're here tonight, Catherine and Michael. I've been married for 19 years. My wife Ulrika is also here with us. I own and operate a business called Sip and Soda in Southampton, which has been a pretty big fabric of the community for 61 years now. I'm going to tell a quick story. I was driving to a hockey game with my son a couple months ago, and he's 12, and he looked at me, he says, "Dad, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to run?" And immediately the first thing that came up was some type of speech to say, well, I want to go out and I want to do this, X, Y, and Z. And he looked at me with his little smile that he has, and it made me think, that's not what he wants to hear. And I thought about it for an extra second, and it hit me, and it said, because, I want to learn through others how the best way to connect, how to contribute, and how to enhance the community in the village. And it's what really, I believe, is a really, really, really important thing to do. And there's some ways, and we will get into how we go about doing these things. But I care about this village very much. It's been a part of my life, and I look forward to the opportunity to go ahead and put my best foot forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. McLaughlin?
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. Thank you for the press, and thank you to the association for hosting this event. My name is Joe McLaughlin, and I'm here as a candidate for trustee. First of all, I'd like to say, just a little background, I'm a lifelong resident of the village. I grew up in the same house like Mark did, that I was raised in, and I still live there. First of all, I was approached by Mayor Irving 2 years ago to join the Planning Commission, and I really felt it was time for me to give back. I have a lot of friends of mine who are volunteer ambulance and firemen and policemen, and I felt that this was a time where I could certainly give back. So over the last 2 years, I've really immersed myself in zoning, planning, and quality of life issues from throughout the village. I've attended probably the majority of all the meetings, from trustee to zoning board to ARB to planning, because I feel, and the reason why is because I felt that, being a layman, that I need to know how these words work, because part of the Planning Commission's job is to assist the trustees, and I felt that, if we could find a way to help these boards function better, it'd be better for all the village, and we have come up with some ideas to do that. So I would hope to take the next step and to help as a trustee for our village going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Got a reminder there just towards the end of that of one last request. If you have a cell phone, could you please take it out and silence it right now so that we don't interrupt the candidates while they're speaking? Okay, so we'll start. I think it's a fair statement that when we start to talk, we're going to cover as many issues that I think are relevant in the village right now as we can today. But there are two really key issues, I think. One is the situation in the business district, and the other is environmental concerns. And I think both of those issues come back in many ways to septics, and the fact that the village still relies on underground septic tank systems rather than something else. I want to start with the mayor and give him a chance to respond to this. Why has it been so difficult to move forward with any kind of real progress on addressing the septic situation in the village?
Well, Jim, I would argue with the We have made tremendous amounts of advances. We've studied with H2M, a big study in 2014. We went through a series of phases. We got to the phase where we had to pay for the project, and that's where we ended up stopping. But in a lot of respects, that has been a great advantage to us because technologies have changed. The development of the village has changed. So now we have far greater opportunities to utilize separate septic systems, pods they're referred to. We also can do a low-pressure system. We have the Southampton Hospital leaving in a number of years. They have a unit down there that we need to take a look at and see if we can now incorporate it into our system since they're leaving. So there is a lot of things that are open. It's a big, big subject, and it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of in-shovel projects that we can try to finance. So it's not a quick fix.
Okay, fair enough. Jesse, you're running based on your experience as a merchant in the village and as well as a resident. And you've spoken, you said, with a lot of business owners in the village. And what is their take on this particular part of the situation, the septics as it relates to the business community?
That's correct. As we know here, I've been a merchant and business owner in the village for 10 years, and I have spoken with many business owners. And business owners unanimously would like to see some type of septic and water treatment because we'd like to have more restaurants, more experiential activities, and more happenings in the village. Everybody always cites Sag Harbor, that they're bustling at night, and that is where our village residents, unfortunately, are going during the evening. Now, that's the consensus that I've had just by talking to pretty much every business owner on Main Street. But I do want to get back to a point that you made. You asked, why is it so hard to make progress on septic? And I would argue it's not. In fact, our mayor, Michael Irving, did reference the H2M study. The mayor of West Hampton Village sat during the presentation of that study and then used our study that we paid for to then go put a sewer system in place in West Hampton. Now, the two villages are different, but the mere fact that she did that shows that it's actually not hard, but it actually takes energy and political will. And then on top of that, we do have areas in the village. Now, I do acknowledge that the hospital does have a sewage treatment system. It is antiquated, but it's there. So that is a resource that's available to us. So the combination of the fact that our business owners do want this, our residents want it, the visitors to our village want it, combined with the fact that West Hampton Village showed that it can be done, demonstrates that it is a real possibility.
Let me give the mayor a chance to respond real quickly, if you want to.
Sure. Southampton is a completely different format than West Hampton Beach. West Hampton Beach has a low system. They've gotten financing because it has in place a lot of water quality issues. Southampton's septic system is of far greater demand. In 2014, the actual cost was $34 million. We had a sewer district diagram of the business district. We did it for a number of weeks. We studied it and worked on it. Then we decided, how are we going to finance this? Are we going to pay for it? Is all the community going to pay for it? Are the business individuals going to pay for it? Many of the business individuals at that time did not want to pay for it. Now, those times have changed. All of us have a lot more respect for the environment, so we need to revisit it. And we need to revisit it so that we have enough expansion capabilities in the septic system, which West Hampton does not. They have a limited expansion system that we would be able to future hook up more of the residential areas.
All right, let me give Jesse one last chance to before I move over to this side of the table. Do you want to add anything?
Sure, thank you. I have
Just
a
real
quick,
briefly.
I'll keep it brief, but I think this one statement says it all. You're right, West Hampton did get financing for it. And I would like to argue that that New York State, through the DEC, gave out $103.8 million of grant money for water treatment and water improvement uses. Now, unfortunately, Southampton Village did not even apply for that money. Villages across the state, Erie, New York, Schenectady, New York, right next to us in Brookhaven, all received money. Some received $100,000, some received $5 million. But I just don't understand how the village does not even apply for these grants that our taxpayer dollars are going to and then get redistributed to other parts of the state because we're just not doing the work. Thank you.
Let me take it over on this side of the table. Mark, I know in our conversations at your endorsement interview, one of the things that you talk a great deal about is something that I think Jesse mentioned, which is kind of experiential experiences in the village to try and get more people here for all of the business community. What do you hear? You run a restaurant in the village, and the wet uses is clearly a big part of the septics, that you can't have more restaurants. You can't expand restaurants in the village right now because of the septic situation. What do you think needs to happen at that level? And do you think it's good for the village to have a plan that brings more of that kind of activity into it?
You know, I do. As a business owner, I can see things from that aspect, and I can see things also from a resident aspect. So it sort of gives me a unique perspective. I also get a chance to talk to a lot of people and hear what they say. And one thing we are learning is that people are now choosing dining, theater, arts, entertainment as their way to go out and experience things and interact. And this village has a template to do that. We have probably the prettiest, I believe, the prettiest walking village out on the East End. We have a village that does not have a highway that runs through it. The one thing we are missing right now is 2 dining options. That hurts. It hurts people that want to come down. I've had many conversations with people in the community, full-time, part-time, visiting. And one of the things they say, one of the things they talk about is they would love to have more options, choices. We understand now that these septic systems with the updated technology can provide that. A major septic plant is probably not going to be the best fit for us based on where we can put it, which we probably don't have much room to. But with technology, I've had a few conversations with some people in that field that say there's a technology called cluster systems that allow a few buildings to join together and be able to use that. And what that's going to provide another dining option. It's going to provide the possibility of having apartments upstairs that gives someone an opportunity to come out here and stay and create a vibrancy. Southampton Village needs some vibrancy. I had a woman come into my store the other day from Dallas, Texas, and she had just gotten into town. The first thing she said, "What's going on here? You know, buildings are empty, and and what's happened?" And one of the things we started to talk about was, what do you think? And the first thing she brought up was families. We need things for families. How do people experience things? They walk, they talk, we look. We're very perception based. And I know when I travel with my family, we try and go to places that gives us a little bit of everything with our family. So I would love to see that side come about, because this community has always been family oriented, but a lot of people are not coming down with their families because they feel that there's not a lot of options.
Let me go over to Joe. Other than the mayor here, you're the only one at the table with experience in village government. So the septic situation is probably something you have some familiarity with. Do you have a take on what needs to happen to begin moving forward? Do you think there's enough progress being made?
So the Planning Commission was debating this last night, at our monthly meeting. And I actually come from the standpoint that we do need to do something, but I personally feel that a centralized plant is not the way to go. I think, as Mark and the mayor alluded to, the cluster systems is key because it controls density, it controls uses, and the village has more control. We can put as many plans in place as we want for a centralized sewer, but that doesn't mean that we have the control. If there's enough flow, people will do what they want to do. And it doesn't really, in my view. So I think decentralized systems is the way to go. I actually had a conversation with Bob DeLuca from the group of the East End the other day, and he actually really emphasized this. We need to do something that's environmentally friendly and also keeps the costs down. Because if I'm elected, the trustees have a fiscal responsibility, fiduciary responsibility to you, the taxpayers, and that's very important. And I would hope to not put more debt on the village. We have a AAA bond rating, so it's very important that we keep our rating high so we can do other things like the lake, and we can apply for uses for to take care of Lake Agawam. So there's other things that we can do, and let's leave the septic more to the property owners and not the municipality. That's my view.
Okay. Andrew, do you have any thoughts on the septic situation?
Yes, I mean, I think that it is something that is very important to Southampton. I think that the technology really has improved over the years, and I think it has given us the opportunity to look at things through a different light and a different scope. So, you know, a few years ago, in 2014, if we had done something for $35 million, that could have strapped Southampton. And as Joe alluded to, we've got a AAA bond rating. And you know, we would have had interest to pay on top of that and everything. So I think that the waiting was good. And in this instance, you know, technology has helped us. We can now look at it in cluster form so that it can be spread out through Job's Lane and Main Street and can really affect the people where it needs to be affected most for the business district. And I think that it will elude also and will allow for more experiential pieces for individuals coming into and families coming into the village. One of the commissions that I am on, or one of the committees that I am on in the village, is the Christmas Decoration Committee. And every year around Thanksgiving, we have the Parade of Lights. And again, this is something that has brought families into the village. We have hamlets all the way from West Hampton all the way out to Montauk now sending trucks that have lights on it. You know, the restaurants are full on that evening. The Southampton Cultural Center hosts Santa for the young kids. The Southampton Arts Center, we would love to get more involved with that. And so these are things that, you know, have allowed us to create experiences within the village that bring the charm and the historical references that we have had in the past, but we've also been able to adapt them a little going forward. And I think that's exactly what this opportunity can allow us is we can have the charm of Southampton Village with full businesses, hopefully maybe with the experiences of more restaurants, bringing people together for an experience.
Okay, Joe, you wanted to add something?
Well, so the county just actually approved, after years, these new systems that actually have been used all over New England, and I believe the flow is about 30,000 gallons per day. Now, I don't know about you, but I think most of the restaurants and even the apartments in this village, that use and that flow would do just fine in terms of if we can create a public-private partnership to make sure that these landlords and these property owners can do the right thing by the village. And if they do, they can have more uses and more abilities for their properties. So,
Is that the direction we're going, Mayor? Is it going to be clustering rather than a large system?
As well as a regular septic system, but it allows us the opportunity to do a private-public partnership. We can put the clusters in back of the shops. We can have a series of shops hook into this system, and they can share into the cost. And today's technology has allowed us to do that. And, you know, quite frankly, it was we were very lucky not to sign up with H2M years ago and have what is considered today an antiquated system, or we would have ended up like the village of Patchogue and a number of other places with sewer districts.
Well, let me ask you, Jesse, do you think that's something that can be sold to the business community, that a public-private partnership on clustered septic systems might be something that the business district might embrace, and it might get over that funding hump?
I think the business district at this point would actually embrace anything. And I also would like to add, I know you had mentioned that, you know, Joe, you know, is on the Village Planning Commission. I am also on the Planning Commission, and our meeting yesterday, in fact, we actually discussed the solutions or how to analyze this problem. Do we have a centralized sewer system? Do we use pods? And I think at this point, we all universally agreed that we actually need to research this further. I think any of these options would be great, but I don't know if it actually makes sense to say we should be using pods, we should be using a centralized sewer system, because we actually don't know the answers, but I think we need something. I'd be perfectly fine with either of those two options, but I would love to actually see what our commission comes back with, what we come back with, and I think that will actually give more specifics to this solution, rather than kind of just saying pods or centralized sewer system, and kind of do it with a more background. So I would kind of leave it at that, because I think they're both good options.
Okay, my apologies. I didn't mean to slight you as a member of the Planning Commission.
No, it's okay.
Apologies. Let me pick it up from there, though. So what can the village government do to really help the business community right now? Some of the things we're talking about are activities and the parade and those kinds of events, but that's not really village government so much. As village trustees and as mayor, what would you do to help the business community?
It's really up to the local government to kind of set the tone for what needs to happen, and then to allow the private sector to be able to operate. So, for example, right now, the health department has a moratorium on restaurants that we can open, giving business owners the ability to actually open restaurants, open ice cream stores, open new places for us to go visit is extremely important. I guarantee you, given the tremendous amount of people, great people that are in the village, the money will come and the investment will come. But right now we're in a situation where private enterprise does not want to be in Southampton Village. If you look at Job's Lane, that illustrates it perfectly. And I cannot understand right now why private enterprise and a community of business leaders do not want to have some type of presence here. So I would leave it at that.
Okay. Mark, you want to pick up that conversation?
I want to build upon a couple things. Joe is really knowledgeable. He's been involved in the Planning Commission, so it's good for me to learn from him. I mean, I don't know everything. I do know I'm a business owner. I do know I'm a full-time resident. I do know that a lot of people talk to me, so I do have that. The other important things like Joe does have, I'm hoping to get an opportunity to learn. And that's what is really important. But we do know this, listening to all the candidates and incumbents up here, we do know this, doing nothing is not an option. We hear that through the community, so that's something that we all understand. I'm involved in a number of things in the village, the two committees, the Christmas Decoration Committee and the Southampton Fest, but also there was a newly formed, what we started to call a business think tank, where a group of business owners in the village got together and started to meet with the mayor and Trustee McGann. And it's one of those things where for years a lot of business owners were really feeling that the village did not care about them. There was always, they always ask us to do something. They say, yeah, go ahead, but you fund it. And, I took a walk down the street in March, and I went to probably most of Main Street and a portion of Joe Lane and just popped my head in just to try and talk to some business owners as well as employees. I got to say, I was a little bit ashamed that I didn't know a lot of the business owners. I've been here all my life, and that was something that I need to take responsibility for. So it's one of the things we have to think about as a community, is how we get involved with each other and connect. But to get back to the think tank, one of the things that we decided to start thinking about is how do you promote a village? How do you give it its best way to shine? And there was a local company here in Southampton that we connected with, and we are now, or I should say the board is now in the process of developing a website for the village that will allow residents, tourists, people that have second homeowners here to come on and see what is going on, what are some of the vibrancy options that are going on in the summer, in the winter, year-round. And we know phones, tablets, computers are the way that people communicate. And so it's something that is really important moving forward, is how do we communicate with the residents, second homeowners, people that come out here for, 3 months at a time, and people that come on in for just a vacation. These are the things we have to be inclusive. We have to be accessible. These are things that we're constantly hearing. So, That is important. Going back to the septic, the public-private is important. There are people out there that do want to help. We do know that. And so we have to look at that very hard.
Okay, Joe, what's your thoughts on what can the village government really do to help the business district right now?
In terms of the empty stores, I spend quite a bit of time walking around town, and I'm just as dismayed as to see the empty stores as anyone else. But in my view, it all comes back to rents. You know, when people want all this money for, you know, just 3 months a year, or even all year long, it's a lot for a small person to take on. So it's very important that we open up a dialogue with the owners and say, hey, we would like to see a vibrant downtown. Is there any way we can have a discussion about maybe, you know, encouraging people to rent? Because I think what happens is the businesses or the owners hold out for the highest and best rent, and that's their prerogative. It's private property. However, you know, it does not look good for the village. I mean, there's at least 5 stores in Job's Lane today that are empty. And part of the reason is, you know, we are a microcosm of Amazon. Despite the fact that we are a wealthy, seasonal community, we are suffering just as much, if not more, than other areas when it comes to Amazon, because people do not, shopping trends have changed. And to Mark's point about the roundtable, I actually was one of the few people, along with the mayor, to start this program. And what really surprised me is that these businesses who we spoke to, most of them are here year-round, and those are the businesses we should be supporting. We shouldn't be, in my view, worried about, you know, if a store closes for the season, because people can't make the money. So what should we do as a community? Support the businesses that are here. We have the oldest mall in the country. Hildreth is the oldest department store. We have one of the oldest hardware stores, family businesses that have been here for over a century, and we should be supporting them all the time, not just once a week and once a month, but all the time. And that's the important thing, to really emphasize the people who are here, not the fact that there's empty stores. That's part of being a seasonal resort. We have to focus on the people who are in that room, the 30 or so businesses that want to help. They want to see all of us go and shop in their stores.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, do you have anything to add here?
Sure. I mean, I think that everyone has made very good points with regards to it, and there isn't, you know, a lot else to add. But I mean, I do think one thing, you know, that Joe talked about with the second floor residential. You know, a lot of the property owners lost that right for residential years ago when they converted it possibly to office space. So maybe there's an idea of allowing them the option, if the septic clusters are put in, allowing them the option of changing it back to second floor residential, because I think that will give, again, it's just giving the opportunity to the property owners, giving the opportunity to the businesses, giving the opportunity for bringing in other experiential experiences with restaurants or things like that. So I think that is something also that could be looked at as well by government.
Okay, Mayor, do you want to wrap it up here?
Very exciting is that this week we have 20 new stores opening in the village of Southampton, 2 new restaurants, and 2 exercise facilities included in that 20. So I am not sure that a lot of the comments about dead sections in the street and horrible-looking stores is so true. I think we have a very vibrant, exciting, strong community in Southampton. And what are we doing to help the businesses? Well, as Mark had pointed out, we have a board set up, which includes Mark, myself, Nancy McGann, trustee, and Julie Fitzpatrick, the assistant to the mayor. We've made a conservative effort to rebrand Southampton, to promote restaurants, to promote the walkability, to promote the experience of retail shopping in Southampton. We've gone further, which is really, we've taken a step beyond what most governments would do, And we've stepped up to bat and are formulating a new website. The website is, Trustee McGann has pointed out, is very important to have action. We're going to have scenes through the village on a walking motion, and these are the things that will promote the stores. We're trying to unify all the retail operations in the village so that they all can work together. We're rebranding the Chamber of Commerce, which is, again, something that most governments don't do. The Chamber of Commerce is a separate entity. It's not involved in the village, but we're willing to help. And I think that's the most important part of Southampton Village, and it's what attracts us all here, is that we all together are willing to help and try to make it a vibrant place.
Let me talk a little bit about affordable housing. Oh, you want to make one last comment, Jesse?
Thanks, Joe. I would want to add, unfortunately, Mayor, that if you believe that our village is vibrant, it does demonstrate that there is a bit of out-of-touchness going on here, because there's not one person in this audience here today that thinks our village is vibrant. I think we need to turn to the rest of the country, who is using things like green space and open space to encourage businesses to open, encourage people to walk around. I think we need to look in our own backyard as far as our parking, to make our parking easier and better accessible. We can look just to East Hampton to look at their parking situation, and I think we need to reevaluate our parking and how that flows within our entire village. I think we need to reach out to some of the leading companies and see if they're interested in working with us. Who knows, but I would like to reach out to companies like Google or Amazon and see if they'd like to do something fun with this, like provide free Wi-Fi for all of our visitors. In addition, we are working on a new website for the village. Thank you for organizing that, and Mark Parrish also, I believe it was his idea to bring this up. But this is how we communicate, but we need to take this a step further. Just in the audience tonight, we have 2 volunteers for the campaign. One gentleman, Nick, in the back, is doing video. We have Wilson Green from Southampton High School doing our photography. This is how we communicate in 2019 with our community. So we really need to step up our photography, our video, and use these platforms on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis to really reach out to our communities so everybody knows what's going on. And it doesn't matter how old or young you are. Pretty much everybody uses Facebook. There's 1 billion users across the world that use it, so it doesn't matter. It's not an age thing. So we really need to use and embrace these platforms in order to just let people know and communicate with our community and constituents.
And I hasten to add, we are live streaming this at Facebook Live at 27 East. So let's talk about affordable housing. When I look at the table here, there's really 2 guys who are part of a different generation. I think Jesse and Joe are part of a very younger generation. Let me ask you, Jesse, is Southampton Village essentially closed to people from your generation? Is that kind of a feeling because of how unaffordable it's become?
I don't think it's closed to people from our generation because of the price point. I think it's closed to people of our generation because everyone in our generation and younger, and also our seniors, are leaving. This is because there is nowhere affordable to live. There's nowhere to live, and there's nowhere to work because you can't live here. It's too expensive. People are moving to other parts of the country. They're even moving to New York City because it's cheaper. And so this, I think, is the fundamental problem. Not that it's closed to everybody. It's just there's no one here. So I think that is at the heart of the problem. And
What needs to be done to address that, then?
well, a lot of people, I know some people in the audience today have realized that we have, or potentially, a density problem. And there's a lot of McMansions and such being built. And I would like to address our zoning so that we don't have a 10-bedroom home being built on a medium-sized plot of land. I'd like to, well, hold your applause just yet. I'd like to see, instead of a 10-bedroom monstrosity, I'd like to see 5 2-bedroom cottages on that piece of property so that people of our generation could afford to rent and live at these places. And so I think that's how we address it. If we're going to have this density, let's make it sure that we have smaller places to live that are more affordable and accessible and be creative in our zoning rather than just continuing to allow some of these 10-bedroom homes to be built. I know we have I will give the mayor some credit. You have done a good job with reducing our GFA and addressing setbacks and such. But I think we need to go a step further because I see for people of my generation and younger, there's nowhere to live. And being able to look into that specifically is extremely important for the future of our village.
That's why I want to give Joe the next chance to answer the question, since you're of the same generation. What do you think, Joe? What are some of the solutions?
I think most people out here, not just in the village, but the East End in general, most people, because of the high values, and the East End has always been more expensive than anywhere else, at least in the nearby area. So I think it's most people, I think, historically, have inherited their homes. And I think, Jesse alluded to something earlier about people leaving. Well, people are partly leaving because, guess what? When we have a town that assesses us at full value, of course we can't afford to live here because your taxes go up every single year. And I'm sure everyone has gotten the reassessment form this year, and it doesn't bode well, especially in the village, for those of you who live in the Tuckahoe Triangle, which is the area of the village which incorporates Tuckahoe School, which, as we all know, has a higher tax bracket than the Southampton School counterpart. So it's very important to address this all at the town level as well. I have had many meetings with Diana Weir on affordable housing, and quite frankly, we should address this, but we have to address it, but also protect zoning, because we don't want in a situation like we have on 39, when you have 60 units on, I think it's less than 5 acres. You should not sacrifice zoning for the sake of affordable housing. So
You're not a fan of that project?
No, I'm not currently, no. I believe they should build as of right, and they should build those cottages or small homes that Jesse was alluding to, because people need, one thing people will love is pride of ownership. And when people own their home and they're able to say, this is my house, they have more pride and they will do right by the community. But if you rent, that could be a different story.
Just so we're clear, what we're talking about there is the proposed affordable housing project behind the Southampton Full Gospel Church. It would be 60 units. It would be workforce housing, some of the housing set aside for veterans and people with disabilities. There's supposedly some money really put aside for this already. Mark, what's your thoughts on that project? Have you had a chance to, do you think as proposed, there's a lot of folks who are concerned about the impact on neighbors, particularly in Hillcrest, for the traffic impact of that project?
Right. One of the things that Andrew and I, when we decided to start running for village trustees, one of the platforms was, equitable housing, places for young people, entrepreneurs to come and live. It is a struggle out here. I was fortunate enough to get the house that I grew up in and raise my kids because of my family, so I'm a lucky one. However, Jesse is in a situation, like you said earlier, it's maybe not right at his fingertips yet. Honestly, it is unaffordable for most people. I hear that all the time, and it disappoints me because there's a lot of great people that can't stay here. On the flip side, there's a lot of people that have stayed here most of their lives, given to the community through service, business, and everything, that have gotten some windfall and moved and are living a better life. So I think that that's great in that aspect. On the 60 development unit, it's an interesting one, because if we sit there and we say, no, we don't want affordable housing, then we're not giving our residents the opportunity to come live here and give back. However, when it comes to a plan that I don't know much about yet, but there is a possible routing into a village residential neighborhood, I'm not crazy about that. And I do want to follow that and make sure that the village is able to voice their opinion and concerns and make sure that there is a way that has not impacted our residential community, because that's not fair.
Yeah, to be clear, it's actually just outside the village limits, but the town has said that the village will have a say, and they've been asking, I think, the village for feedback. So, Andrew, what's your thoughts about that project in particular and affordable housing in general?
No, I agree that I think it is very important to be able to have affordable housing for people who are working, living, veterans, possible for teachers and stuff like that, so that they can afford and live closer, to where they work. I do think that, this project, as you said, it is outside of the village. So, again, we will have to work with the town to do it. So I look forward to learning more I look forward to being able to take a stance on that from the communications and conversations with everyone in that. I do think one of the big things is we have lost right around the village on Meeting House Lane, on a couple of other roadways near the village. We have lost a lot of primary homes. When I was growing up here, a lot of those areas were primary homes. They are now no longer primary homes. And I think that's something that we really need to look at as well. And as Joe and as Jesse have said, how can you make it more affordable for young people to move back into the village and not just have to wait for an inheritance of a home? So that's my...
Okay, fair enough. Mayor, the project that's being proposed off County Road 39, bring us up to speed on what you think of that project and what the village, at this point, what's the general position of the village?
Well, presently, the developer is going to give a presentation to the village. I think, I'm not sure of the exact scheduled date, but it's towards the end of June, so it's hard to determine exactly how the project is going to fan out and what it's going to encompass until we hear directly from him. But he is going to give a presentation. That was part of our letter that I wrote to the town, is that I requested that any project that goes forward in that area needs the review of the village also. But let's get back to workforce housing, because there's really two types of low-income housing. There is workforce housing, which I've got to give them credit. Bonnie Cannon and Curtis Heinzman years ago, along with the help of a number, again, community, a number of the local builders, did a project on the western end of the village in which they built 4 houses in there. Those houses were done on a lottery system to individuals that were involved with our fire department, our EMS service, and I believe one of them was a nurse in the hospital. So those are what I consider workforce housing. The project that's proposed at the Gospel Church at this point is more low-income housing. And in its case, you aren't required to be an individual from the village. You aren't required to be an individual from the town. You can be an individual from anywhere in the state, and you have to meet certain financial requirements. My concern is that we aren't helping our situation with that. We're actually probably, if that's the way the project is going to go, we're probably causing more harm, because as Mr. Warren here has pointed out, Southampton is not an inexpensive place to live, and it's not just the housing. I mean, when I was growing up here, I went through some really interesting apartments, I got to tell you. Some of them were a little tight, and some of them were below other individuals. But, I got through all that and ended up buying a house, and was so scared that I bought a house. I used to drive by it for about a month and go, oh my God, I own that. And am I going to be able to pay for it? So there is a huge issue, as Mark pointed out, to keep the residents in the village. But I'm not sure that we want to go in the direction of a tight cluster unit just on the edge of our boundaries.
Jesse, I don't think we gave you a chance to weigh in on that project in particular. What's your thoughts on that project?
Sure. So I've been following this project, and more specifically, I've been following what the residents of Southampton Village think about this. And at the board meeting where this came up, I listened to some of the constituents. And a lot of the constituents, particularly people who live in the adjacent area on Miller Road and on Hillcrest Avenue and Windward Way, most people who actually want affordable housing don't like this project. For example, I don't know if she's here, and sorry for calling you out, but I know that Shonda Campbell, for example, got up and said she was opposed to this project. And she was opposed to it not because we're against it, but because of the safety issues that would be prevalent in the Hillcrest Avenue community. And so to me, the job of mayor or trustee is to listen to the residents of our village and to make our decisions based upon what our village wants. And I don't think anyone is opposed to any type of housing projects. I think this is more of a safety issue. But I know the mayor just brought up what he called low-income housing. I think that we need to, I don't even know what low-income housing means, because who's to find what income, what type of income is low or high? I mean, in 2019, you know, it's kind of not that clear cut. But I think, as I brought up, as far as the type of accessible housing that I'm speaking about, you know, that's the kind of housing that the village needs. It should be done through zoning, through the private sector, versus, you know, in this project, again, the job is to listen to the constituents, and it definitely speaks something when the same constituents who are really pushing aggressively affordable housing don't like this. I think that says a lot.
Okay, let's move on. Mayor, there were a couple of projects in the last couple of years, the Mocamonto decision, the Gin Lane decision just recently at the regulatory board level in the village that caused some controversy, and a lot of folks were upset about those, and they led to lawsuits in some cases. Let me ask you, is that a sign of trouble with your regulatory boards, that you're having this kind of discord when decisions are being made and a lot of people in the village really object to those decisions? And I'm curious, when you're deciding, and this is a question I'll ask everybody, is how do you pick people for regulatory boards? You clearly, as village board members and even as mayor, can't direct regulatory boards to do anything. Your only real impact is on how you choose members for those boards. How do you go about doing that to try and address this problem?
Well, we advertise and we do a series of interviews of people who have an interest in serving the boards. We've recently gotten more interest, which is always good to see, because we do need people to serve on our boards. But you made a point which I don't really kind of agree with, Joe. You mentioned that there was a problem on those boards. I don't think either of those applications were a problem. We had balanced boards. We had boards that weren't weighed in any direction. We had a good, equal share of individuals on those boards. Those individuals did an incredible amount of due diligence on both of those projects, and they went along their natural way. Those two projects were huge projects for the village of Southampton, huge undertaking for the individuals that are on the board. You've got to sort of picture yourself as a board member. You have an applicant coming before you. They have a whole group of attorneys. They have architects. They have landscapers. And you are, for the most part, an individual. So it's very difficult to sit on the board. And I don't think anybody should criticize anybody that is on these boards, because they do an incredible job. I appreciate them all, and I thank them all for the work they do.
Jesse, do you want to take that up?
You know I would. You know, Mayor Irving, you're making it way too easy on me tonight. Thank you. Our boards, you know, there is a bit of a problem with our boards. Our board members, you're right, are doing a great job, and they are trying their best. But in this particular situation, we spoke about Mocamonto, our boards are turning into the clash of the titans. I mean, we have constituents spending $500,000, you know, fighting these projects. And I just don't think that needs to be the case. I mean, how do we have a situation where in our small village, you know, we have millions of dollars being spent on legal fees, and everyone fighting each other? That to me does not seem like Southampton Village to me. That's not what I want to see and envision in Southampton Village. You know, our board members who are working extremely hard are afraid that they're going to get sued personally for their decisions. I mean, we don't want to put them in that situation. Which means we need really strong, potentially better legal advice. Maybe we need a second attorney on our boards to help out. But we don't want to put our board members in a situation where they're coming down to being fearful of being sued personally. Now, going back to the question of how do you choose who will be on our boards, I have two criteria. The first criteria is who I would choose to be in any business. You know, we need people who you would want to hire in your everyday business. We need people who are outgoing and friendly and smart. We need team players, but we need the right people for these boards, and the same type of person that I would want to hire in my business, Mark, the same type of person you want to hire in your business. These are the type of people who we want to put on our boards. Now, secondly, for me, I have an emphasis on preservation. So I would want to make sure that anyone who we want to put on our boards does care about the preservation of our village. Now, that's up for interpretation, but if you don't want to preserve our village, if you want to build on every single plot of land in this village so that there's no green space and that everyone is pushed out, you're probably not the right candidate for me if I'm elected.
Okay. Let me throw it to the trustee candidate. Joe, you talk about you've been sort of immersing yourself in the planning side of things since you've been on the Planning Commission. What's your take on the situation with the regulatory boards in the context of these couple of decisions that came down over the last couple of years?
So having attended these meetings, regarding Moncamonto and Gin Lane, it's very difficult because as an audience member, you don't get to read you don't get to read the documents, you don't get to read all of the testimony that the board members get to read. So it really is hard to make a clear, concise decision. However, I think that I think that the boards themselves, they work very hard. However, that being said, I think this all comes down to the code and the language used in the code, because I think the language is so elusive that there's the verbiage can mean anything. You have words like size, scale. Well, in what context is size and scale? So I think the wording being used in the code needs to be clarified, so the board members know exactly what their duties are, and to make sure that they use those duties in the proper context. Now, I would like to also say that this also should open up a discussion of expansion of the historic district. The district has not been really touched in almost 30 years. So I think it's high time that the trustees, along with the ARB and the other boards, look at how to expand it and what to incorporate within that district. Because if we don't have historic character, what do we have? We've been here since 1640, so it's high time that we step up and preserve what we have left.
You have less experience in all of this as candidates for trustee because you haven't really been part of village government. Appointing people to those regulatory boards is a big part of what the trustees do. What kind of criteria will the two of you, use in picking candidates? We'll start with Andrew.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I would agree with Jesse on this, is you would want to put people in that, you kind of would want to work with. I think it's important that you can collaborate with all of the constituents and all of the people that you would want to work with. I know if elected, I would look forward to working with the two trustees that are still in place now, as well as whoever is elected for mayor. I've had good working relationships with Michael in the Christmas committee, and I would look forward to working with Jesse as well as whoever else is elected with me, if elected, for village trustee. So I think that is important. I also think that knowledge and being able to talk to the individuals, being able to talk to architects for the planning boards and stuff is very important, as well as independence. There should be make sure that there is independence, on these boards as well.
Mark, and do you have any thoughts on Moncamonto and the Gin Lane decisions and some of the other things that have come before?
I'm glad I'm not on the ARB. I will say that. I've followed a lot of these things, and I'm not really privy to all the information, but I do want to say this. It's really fascinating. It's really interesting how this community is sort of being disconnected, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of these things that we're talking about today. And it's one of the things that is really important that we really look at and we start trying to foster this community to get back together. Picking people, yeah, that is something that has to be done. In an interview, is the person that sits in front of you that tells you everything you want to hear going to necessarily follow through? We don't know that. That's the thing. But if you're educated, and we try and bring in people that understand the laws, like Joe had said, and understand what type of community this is. We can look to places like Nantucket. Nantucket has done an unbelievable job with their historic preservation to deal with a lot of the things that happens in a lot of seaside communities. This is not something that just is here. But these are the places that we have to start. It's the education side of things. It's the applying it. And, it's asking probably uncomfortable questions.
Joe, you want to say?
I'd like to add two things. Number one, I think, as Mark just said, we should look to other communities. We're not the only wealthy seaside community. There's Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard. I would encourage all of you to watch the movie One Big House by Thomas Vina. It's about development and how it's affected the island of Martha's Vineyard. And I think it's very important to, when it comes to our village, though, maybe it's time if a board member's term is up, we should, us as trustees or the mayor, should take them in and re-interview them and see how they feel. If they're still up to the job, to the criticism and all the issues that go along with it. And I think it's very important to see how we can work with them and how we can make their job easier. Because to a degree, their job is harder than the trustees because they're up there taking heat twice a month, and they are the people that have to make decisions that affect people's lives. So it's very important that we make sure that each member of these boards looks at what's good for the village and make sure that things are done as per the code, as per the rules and regulations of the village.
Jump on in, Mark.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the members of these boards, they do work really hard. I've gotten that chance to talk to a lot of them, and it's a long night for a lot of these, and sitting there trying to put myself in situations where I would have to, it makes me just value their service. It's a very delicate subject. We have to respect property rights. I'm not crazy about big houses, but I really have to respect property rights. And I know that the village over the last X amount of years has done some tightening up of its codes and zoning and things like that. So it's been moving in the direction. Where do you go? I don't have that answer right now, but I do know this. There's a lot of people that really want to sit down and start thinking about things, and I think that's what's one of the things. With this opportunity going forward, with 3 new faces up here, with another new face, and with an incumbent, there's a lot of good things to look at, and we got to embrace that.
Let me ask a different question. We touched briefly on Lake Agawam and the conditions there, and we talked about the septics. And part of the septics, we discussed the impact on businesses, but there's also the impact on the environment, and not just Lake Agawam, but also the groundwater. So let me just cut to the chase. What are the toughest measures that you're willing to propose in the village to try and address both improving the conditions of Lake Agawam and just protecting groundwater? How tough are you willing to get? Joe?
I think it's important to make sure that all the property owners around Lake Agawam have the appropriate buffer. They are supposed to have a 50-foot buffer around their portion of their lake of the shoreline. So I think it's very important to make sure there is no lawns going down to the water, and that maybe we should be encouraging them tenfold to upgrade their septic systems. The new IA systems are available, and the county does allow people to upgrade regardless of the income. So I encourage all residents to do that. That being said, unfortunately, the village itself cannot supersede the state in banning certain pesticides, herbicides. I did my research last night, and I actually was talking to a few people. We cannot, unfortunately, do that unilaterally. So it's important that we open up a dialogue with the homeowners and say, they're in the front lines. It's their values. It's their health. So we need to have that dialogue with them. And also to open up a dialogue with the town trustees. Trustee Ann Welker came to the village board a few weeks ago to look at having a measurement buoy put in to measure the toxins and when we have these algae blooms. So it's very important to use technology and take steps to go forward to clean the lake, because it is a vital health risk And it's also an issue that we all have to deal with one way or the other.
Let me bring it over to the mayor and give you a chance to answer this, and then I'll throw it open to the rest of the table. What kind of measures, what's the next step that you'd be willing to take to try and address Lake Agawam and protecting the groundwater in the village?
Well, first, Joe, let me say Lake Agawam is not a recent occurrence. It's been that way. It's a closed system. It's not flushed, so it's been that way for years and years and years in the village of Southampton. It's been our source of drainage. One of the real difficult problems is the sediments on the bottom of Lake Agawam need to be removed if we're ever going to reach a satisfactory level of water quality there. But let me tell you what we're doing. We've made a lot of inroads. We've done and followed the comprehensive plan. We've addressed the runoff. We've had a four-phase system of catch basins, one of which caused great commotion on Job's Lane this spring, but it was for a good thing. There's 19 basins in there. We've also done Windmill Lane. We've done Bowden Square. All total, I think there's 16 different projects to capture the runoff. If we can control the runoff and we can control our point source, then we are going to end up being able to be ahead of the game. Then we can control the septic and we can control the individual housing. We have another project on Gin Lane, which we've applied for grant, and contrary to Jesse's constant referral that we don't go after state and federal money, we've got matching money coming from the state and federal government, and we've done all those projects that way. What he doesn't realize is that you have to have a shovel-ready project to get your financing. You can't just go to the government and go, hey, can I get some money? It doesn't work that way. But that's nice. Then that project there, we should be able to control Gin Lane. After that's done, Gary Gillespie in our highway department and DPW has made a conservative effort to go and mark where the sediments are in Lake Agawam. We're going to take a look at that. We have Nelson, Pope, and Voorhees coming back from the Lombardo study, which was done a number of years ago, to pinpoint the positions which they did test wells. We're going to do more test wells there so we can get a baseline and a comparison. When we get all that data together, we can pinpoint where the pollution source is coming from, because it could be surface water, groundwater, and it could be deep water. So we got to figure out where it's coming from. Certainly the homes around the lake are a huge issue. You can do Google Earth and you can go green lawn, green lawn, green lawn, and then once in a while you see a brown lawn. So those are contributing factors. And as Joe pointed out, the IA systems would certainly be a big benefit there, along with buffers, which aren't being used.
What can you do to make brown lawns a point of pride? I think that's the key. You got to change the attitude. You got to have
Joe,
people be proud to show
yeah,
the brown lawn.
You're so right. And I got to tell you, when I was a kid, there was nobody had sprinkler systems. I can remember playing softball games in the afternoons and stuff, and the grass would be mostly sand with tufts here and there of grass. It's just the new concept is to have turf grass. Look at the individuals that are on Dune Road and Meadow Lane. Beautiful scenery, beautiful natural growth of everything from wild roses to beach grass. What do? They tear it up and they put in green turf grass, the greenest grass you've ever seen, and they water it all the time. It's just the trait of the...
Jesse, you want to pick it up from there?
Sure. Just to address the mayor's comments about me not knowing things, luckily I think those comments speak for themselves as far as one's general attitude and approach towards doing things. But secondly, when we discussed shovel-ready projects, we should have many shovel-ready projects. You're right, you can't just ask any type of fund, CPF fund, government DC for money. You've got to have those projects ready to go. So as a village, we should be working on these, and we should be having a assembly line of projects ready to go so that we can apply for this grant money and then go get it. There are so many experts out there across the east end of Long Island, across the state, that can essentially guide us on these projects. For example, one of these projects that I'd like to see happen right away is a natural treatment center. So the village, through the CPF, just acquired a plot of land right next to the home of Pyrus Concert. I'm glad we got the CPF money, but I understand that a lot of village and town residents think $10 million for a piece of property is a giant waste of taxpayer money. But we can actually turn maybe a potential problem into an opportunity. So a natural treatment center essentially would allow water from our lake to flow up to this property. We would use greenery, plants, and other natural methods in order to treat this water, to reduce the nitrogen, and then have flow right back to the lake. That is an amazing opportunity that we can pursue. It's a new technology, and we can right away apply for CPF and state funds in order to do this. There are plenty of engineers that can do this. Bill Chaliff, one of our local engineers, has put me in touch with a firm that can do this. There are plenty others, but I think this is the exact type of project, shovel-ready, that we can do.
Sure, jump in.
That is a beautiful piece of property that we acquired from the Wyman estate, but CPF funds require it to be kept as open space. There is no ability to put any kind of a treatment center or any facility up there except for passive walking paths. We have, with again Gary's direction, taken a look at what is referred to as the ROW, which is our right-of-way, putting a rain garden in there to capture some of the runoff from Windmill Lane. But that property itself has covenants on it that it can never be developed.
Let me, just out of curiosity, though, I think what he's proposing isn't development so much as natural plantings that would be filtered. And I think the only kind of development it would require is pumping water onto the property.
They're very clear on it, Joe. It's to be open space.
Throw it to this side. Does anybody want to come in on this and talk about, what kinds of measures would you be willing to take to both protect Lake Agawam and also just to protect the groundwater? How far would you be willing to go?
The village just did the basins. That's going to stop some of the flow going in there, so that's a positive step that they've taken, and they're looking to do more of that, I believe, also. But what I do have learned and understand is dredging is a real important thing, because the bottom of that lake is all soot. I don't even think anybody knows what's on the bottom of that lake, to be honest with you. I mean, I've fallen in there before, and I used to fish in there, so it's pretty nasty. But definitely scooping up the bottom, getting a lot of the oxygen to come on through, and the way that it sort of can heal itself is a real important way to go. And I know that Gary has spoken about it. People that are in the industry of dredging who I know have also said the same thing. So that's a real good way to start, because we stop everything from coming in, but we don't deal with what's there already. What are we really doing?
Yes, I agree. I think that there are a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of education to be had. A lot of studies have been done, and I think that the solutions are vast and many. There were plantings that were going to be done on some sides of Lake Agawam that would be helpful. The dredging is definitely a possibility that I think should be looked at as well, which I think that the mayor has suggested that is in the works and looking at where the pollution is. I think Joe is right that the property owners, we need to try and have a conversation and dialogue with them to let them know what is happening and make sure that buffers are in place. So it really is, again, creating conversations, creating connections with individuals within the community. It's also working with the business owners in the landscaping to let them know, what are some of the products that they are using? Do they fully understand what those products are? And see how we can best help everyone, because even some of the organic natural solutions still wouldn't help exactly some of the problems that we are trying to alleviate.
Joe, did you want to put a point on this?
Since being on the Planning Commission, I have worked very closely with Trustee Allen to address the CPF issue. As we all know, the village is pretty much built out, and there was very few parcels left. I know the former administration did purchase the 11 acres on Moses Lane, which is great, but I spent countless hours with Trustee Allen going through the village and seeing what is worth it to be preserved. And there's a few spots. That being said, I worked with her to look at this portion of the Wyman estate. It was set to be subdivided. Actually, it was subdivided due to the owners wanting to sell. So we came in and we worked with the CPF and the Peconic Land Trust to preserve it. Yes, it's only 3 acres, but yes, it's adjoining a historic property, the Pierce Concert property, and also saves the lake from having one more house on it, because even if they do have to put the new systems in, it's property that's preserved, and we can use that property to have runoff and surface water to be contained, and that's very important. And so we need to preserve what we have in addition to our historic nature. So, yes.
Okay. I want to tell the audience we're going to be coming close to wrapping up here soon, but I want to give everybody a chance in a couple of minutes here. If you have any questions that you want to ask the candidates that we haven't asked, there's a microphone here and a microphone here. I'd ask you to line up to do that. But I please implore you, no speeches, no attacking candidates, nothing like that. We really just want you to be able to ask a question. So before we go to that, let me ask you, the hospital property, with any luck in a couple of years, maybe as soon as 5 years from now, the Southampton Hospital property may be vacated because Stony Brook Southampton is looking to add a new $300 million hospital on the campus. And the hospital is going to have to decide what to do with that piece of property. It's actually owned locally by the Southampton Hospital Association. They will ultimately have the say in what happens, but so will the village, and they clearly want to work with the village. So again, cutting to the chase, I'm going to give you guys a magic wand, and you can make it anything that you want. What do you think should go there? What would be the best thing for the village to do with that piece of property? Let's start with you, Andrew. We haven't started with you much here.
Thank you, Joe. Nothing like being put right on the spot, especially because I live very close to the hospital. So I'm glad that my children are getting older. So hopefully emergency room visits won't be as necessary when it moves a few miles away. No, I think it's very important to try and look now at what is going to be happening with the hospital. There are about 18 acres of land that are there that could be developed, could be green space, could be a plethora of options in between. And I think, again, it's imperative that we have conversations with the hospital association so that we can understand what they want from that land. Because it is private property. They have every right to do what they want with it. And at the same time, being such a large part of Southampton and a large acreage right in the village, I think it's very important that there is a dialogue so that we can use it to the best usage of both of our advantages. We would have the right as a village board and as a mayor and as zoning, I guess, to try and shape what could go there. And I believe if we are too restrictive, that wouldn't fly with them, and they could try and sell it off piece by piece. If we are too liberal, it probably won't help the residents there, including myself. So again, I think it's direct conversations with them so that we can see what the best usage would be over the next few years.
Okay, hand the wand to Mark now. Now you get to do it. Now what are we doing with that property?
Well, we know we're going to lose quite a bit when the hospital leaves employees, and all the medical village are probably going to end up heading to the west also. So I know the Planning Commission has had some interviews with some companies. I was at a meeting where they believe, I guess, Joe, they chose one, correct? You have chose one?
Yes. The village did choose James Lima.
Yes. It was a really, really great presentation. This company has worked with hospitals throughout the state and island and then probably beyond our borders of the state. And they had some really, really interesting things. It was really a great learning experience for me to sit there and watch. So I think that if the hospital is going to really want us to be with them and they're going to want this company to be with them, we're going to have to listen to the hospital first and foremost, because it is their property. We can't put them in a situation where they're not going to be able to generate their income to move on to create their, state-of-the-art hospital. So it's a really, really, really way that we're going to have to blend with them to choose the best option for them, but also the best option for Southampton Village. There's tons of possibilities, and this is what makes it so interesting is, what can we do as a village and as a partnership with the Southampton Hospital Board to give us the best opportunity and to give them one also. So I think that's where we're really going to have to sit there and, work together and really look for vision.
Joe, you want to tackle
I
it?
think it's very important. Whatever James Lima comes back with, they're a very good firm. They're very well known, very familiar with Southampton and the surrounding area. I think it's very important to look at the 20 acres that the hospital has, and let's see if we can incorporate some green space. Those parking lots weren't always parking lots. Let's see if we can get some green space back. Let's look at the freestanding homes that the hospital uses for housing, for offices, and let's see if we can maybe, revert them back to homes or have apartments to a degree. It all comes down to what a developer wants to do, and I think it's very important for the village to shape the zoning to make sure that whatever goes there encompasses open space and it's zoned properly, and that the community, all of you, is in agreement with it, because that's the most important thing. We are here to serve you.
Okay. Jesse, you've got the one. Now, what are you going to do with that property?
Well, through the Village Planning Commission, which is a board that I love participating in, which is a think tank, and I'd love to still attend every meeting if elected, because I think it's an amazing board as far as the ideas we come up with. We are likely going to select James Lima, as we pointed out, as well as a group of other planning firms to determine how to zone and ideally what we'd like to see there. Now, as this is a collaborative process, the hospital does own the property. So as far as the direction that I'd like to give James Lima, who, by the way, has helped do Governor's Island in New York City and a number of other amazing projects, I'd love to kind of have some type of combination, if I can wave my wand, of green space, of some light housing, and other mixed uses. Now, that being said, I'd love to see what James Lima comes up with. Again, his resume is incredible, and I think at that point we can kind of get some feedback from him and then work directly with the hospital and its board of directors to determine how we want to zone it, because again, it is their property, so we want to have an amazing relationship with them and then determine kind of how to go from there. So I'd love to kind of see what they come back with.
Mayor, do you have any vision for that piece of property?
It was 2 years ago I started the project to get the Planning Commission to choose a firm to take a look at that property, because I've always been very concerned as soon as I heard that the hospital was leaving. The hospital is a significant contributor to the village of Southampton. Its impact is far vaster than just owning 18 acres of property there. It is the largest employer out on the East End. All those nurses and doctors visit our retail operations and visit our village, visit our restaurants. It is a considerable, significant factor to our bond rating. So the hospital has been a very important aspect of Southampton Village for many, many years. I hate to see it go. I understand why it wants to go. I understand that the medical industry has changed, and I hope We'll need to see what this marketing analysis comes back with, but I certainly hope that they come back with a combination of residential keepings so that we don't impact the community. And I also hope they come back with industry or a retirement center or something that will continue to generate employment in the village of Southampton.
Okay. Hi, Evelyn. No speeches, right?
Absolutely.
And be nice.
I have a question of Jesse Warren.
Okay.
About two elephants in the room who have barely been mentioned. Are you aware that the ARB considered itself an aesthetic board rather than one considering the size of properties, since they're supposed to preserve the harmony in this situation? Where do you think that idea came from? It's unique in New York State, by the way, and possibly in the entire country. Size
Okay.
is a major factor.
Let's let
Have you
Jesse answer. Thank you.
considered where that came from? And by the way, ditto with the planning board. Both of these boards have been continuously misinformed about their function.
Okay. All right. We got the
And
question.
have you looked into that?
We got the
And
question.
what would you do?
Jesse, you want to pick that up?
All right. By the way,
Thank you.
Evelyn, I came by your house about 2 times looking for your signature for petitions, but I don't know where you went. Okay. It was around April. In any case, that is true. There is as some legal cases around our boards as far as to what extent our boards can consider size, and I do believe that's an important aspect. Now, I'd actually wanted to highlight what Joe McLaughlin said, which I think is great, where you said that some of the issues with our boards comes down to our code, and I think really addressing our code so that we don't have some of these issues that we're currently seeing is really important. So I think what Joe said earlier is really important.
Anybody else have anything they want to say? Have this gentleman
My
ask.
name is Robert Essay. I'm on the Planning Commission. I also served on the Architecture Review Historic Preservation Board. I'd like to ask the mayor and the trustees, about 10 years ago, we had the village resurveyed to expand the historic district. I'd like to know if you are willing to adopt those expansion to cover more of the village for historic district. The other question I have is that I understand the code. If somebody tears a historic building down, the code is only an $800 fine or something like that. I made a suggestion, instead of that, of having a 2-year moratorium that cannot do anything with the property and make them refile. Would you support that measure?
Let's start with the mayor.
I'd absolutely support that measure. You know, it is too easy to tear down than to look at and try to restore. And back to the historical districts, we are taking a very close look at expanding the historical district. We also need to take a close look at identifying historical structures. And we need to landmark a lot of those structures. Now, as you well know, that we have our historical district divided into 4 different units. You know, we have the Wickapog, we have the historical district, we have the Meadow Lane, and we have the business district. It is imperative, I think, going forward, that we follow the guidelines that have been previously set. One of the difficulties is those guidelines have not been set. Now, Jesse was asked the question about size and reference of size to the ARB. That's laid out actually in our historic comprehensive plan. It specifically says that the ARB can look at size and consider mass. We haven't been doing that previously. There's a lot of things that we haven't been doing previously, and we're slowly sorting through those and getting resolve on them. But we need to continue doing that. You're 100% right.
Does anybody else want to answer, Joe?
So I had looked at those same guidelines, and so there's about 400 plus structures that were classified back in 2000. I believe. And Bob, you on the board, so you probably know more than I would about that. And you know, I would go further. I would say if you have a house, preferably in a area such as Meadow Lane, Gin Lane, and you're going to buy it for $10, $20 million, why then are we going to allow the owner to tear it down because it's costs too much to fix it up? If they can afford a $10 million house, they can certainly afford to fix it up. We all know what happened with 40 Mile Lane and what happened there. A house that was historic, and we need to go forward preserving our historic structures.
Okay. Sure, Jesse.
So as far as expanding the historical district, that is something that I would absolutely love to see happen. Now, when I speak with Paul Travis, who's the chairperson of the Planning Commission, he actually said this is something that should have been done and was a two-step process that the second step was never completed. One thing I wanted to highlight that really bothers me is the destruction of Pyrus Concert's house right on Lake Agawam. That was a travesty. It should never have happened. It was not just offensive to the African-American community, it was offensive to everybody. And so, to answer your question, I hope that, that being stricter and expanding the historical district would help address some of those problems. But that's a perfect example of something that never should have happened. It is not talked about enough, and every single time I walk by that, it is extremely disappointing to me.
Okay. Anybody else?
So, to add to that, I think Jesse's correct to the degree that we should be that, and that was a case where the house was deemed not historic, and I think also it cost too much to quote unquote fix up and make it a preserved historic house. So again, I say, why are we allowing people who are investing millions of dollars of their own money to tear down houses that we deemed historic 20, 30 years ago? It's not right.
Okay. Thank you for your question, Bob. Appreciate it. Greg?
This goes back to the discussion of the village, the Jobs Lane, Main Street, landlords charging too much money. How would any of you feel? There's an advantage if you don't rent your space, you get a tax advantage. How would any of you feel to the idea of enforcing a vacancy tax, whereby for a portion of the year, if not all the year, maybe not all the year, but a portion of the year, that a vacancy tax would be imposed of, say, $2,500 a month. In Palm Beach, the stores are not allowed to look the way they do right now. Vacant windows, they're required to put up very expensive black and white sketching of what Worth Avenue used to look like. At least if we had something like that in place, there's something that could easily be fixed. That's number one. Number two, the vacancy tax would get these greedy landlords, and I appreciate it's their property, but charging $10,000, $15,000 a month on a triple net lease is absurd. Imposing a vacancy tax would offset the tax advantage they would get the next year.
Interesting. Mayor, did you want to field that?
Yeah, Greg, if I could. One of the problems in the village, some of the vacancies, and not all of them, but some of them, the individuals are taking a passive loss. You're 100% right. And they're just holding the property to take the passive loss. Then there's another group that have rented stores so that they get the above apartments for their help, and they leave the stores alone. We have taken a close look at the vacancy tax. I have been hesitant because of property rights to enforce it, but if it continues along the road that it is, and it's not a village problem, it's a nationwide problem, but I believe in creating the vibrancy of the village. We also have taken a look at East Hampton's law in regards to window treatments. We've looked at the possibility of having artwork from various artists, left in the windows for the off-season. So we've looked at all these things. A lot of them take time, unfortunately, to act on, and a lot of them have severe impacts, such as the vacancy tax, and you don't want to rush into something like that.
I understand that it has a severe impact, but it would also offset the fact that people are charging egregious rents for small spaces, and there's no way a small new store or we used to have mom and pop stores
Here,
in
let
town.
me give these guys a chance
Go
to
ahead.
answer.
Let
Yeah.
me just answer that. That has changed. You're correct, as you know, because you've been a retailer in the village a long time. And I know my wife's been in her store for 15 years and another 15 years working for another store. And there's been a drastic change in rents. The rents have gone from individuals coming down and going, boy, it's a slow month, why don't you postpone your rent to the next month, or let me help you out somehow, to a unbelievable square foot price, to having to pay the taxes, having to pay the insurance, everything for the individual that's renting that place. And that is unfair. You're 100% right, and we need to address that. We've spoken to one of the largest commercial rental individuals that is in the village, and slowly we're working with them. And I think that's why you've seen a lot of stores come in recently.
Okay. Anybody want to pick it up? Jesse, did you?
Sure. So if you asked that question 10 years ago, I would have unequivocally said absolutely not. That was the time we needed more business and we needed whatever we could to get them in, and we still do. But right now, when a few months ago we have our stock market at an all-time high, we have unemployment at 3.8%, and our economy is still doing quite well, we shouldn't be having vacant stores in our village. Now, the specific problem, and this is what local government is for, is that we actually know who those landlords are. And it's not a whole lot of them. It's really a handful. I could actually count them on one hand. So I'd like to actually speak to those landlords to find out what exactly is going on over there, to which you kind of demonstrated what is going on. And then at that point, maybe we should consider, and this is not for people who are just can't rent their space for some reason. This is for people who are intentionally keeping their spaces open for a tax write-off, as you said, or are doing it for no other reason because they don't care. Any person, even a libertarian who wants government out of the way, would say when one party is actually making a problem for an entire community, then that's the time for government to actually take some action. So I would consider that, of course, with conversations first with those landlords to find out what exactly is going on. But I know who those landlords are, and if elected, I will be speaking with them.
Any of you guys? Mark, you want to?
I'm going to touch base with what Jesse said. I agree with what he's saying. There is companies, one of the local real estate offices that deals with a lot of these empty buildings. The owner coming to a couple of our think tank meetings. He gave a really interesting perspective on there are companies, consulting companies, the way he described, that go and work with building owners and try and attract businesses. They used it up in one of the towns in outside of Westchester. I don't remember the name of it, but he said it was really successful. So basically what it does is that these consultants come on in, they meet with the landowners or the building owners, and then they go and they find these companies or businesses that can come on in, and they have a track record, and it allows them to start this relationship. But it all starts with, I believe, the board, the government, the village, reaching out to the landowners and saying, listen, we have a real problem here. Look, we know that Southampton is a destination. We know that Southampton is, when you hear about it, when I travel and people ask me where I'm from, and I say Southampton, their eyes go wide open. That's what people think. They think that it's just flowing with money. Well, it's not, because a lot of these business owners can't afford to do business here. That's sad. That hurts the downtown. That hurts the community. And what eventually it will do, it's going to hurt people from wanting to come in here and do business, which will then, you would say, decrease the values of our buildings, which at that particular point, it gets a little bit scary. So reaching out, sitting down, saying, look, long-term solutions, long-term visions. We're going to have a master plan to start looking at again. That's going to enable us an opportunity to sort of create that vibrancy. But we need you as anchors to start working together with us, the building owners, business owners, and the government.
Andrew, I'll give you a chance to go next.
So in terms of the vacancy tax, I think it's something to be looked at. I think, especially for seasonally, I think, it would be grossly unfair to charge a store a tax, especially if they're not open in the winter, because there's not enough business in the winter. That being said, those stores that do close in the winter are paying rent year-round, and that's a fact. So, and I know you know that. personally. So it's important that if we are going to look at a vacancy tax, it should be seasonally. In addition to that, I think when we look at the vibrancy of the downtown, it all comes back to two things: rent, and also what do we want our village to look like? What can we use in this village? What do we need? And what kind of stores would be profitable?
Okay, Andrew?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think that it's a very important issue, and I think that, you know, we do have a master plan that was put in place 5 years ago, and I think we really should look at that and see how that could possibly be updated to take into account what is happening in the village. I also agree with Mark that I think a lot of it stems through conversations with the landowners and the building owners, conversations with the consultants who could possibly help shape what stores could come in here, because we certainly wouldn't want all big box stores coming into Southampton. Again, I think that would take away from the charm and the character that we so love. I mean, I think the fact, you know, Hildreth's, Herrick's, all of these stores, Sip and Soda, that we have grown up with and we have known for so long, we don't want to see completely disappear. And so I think, again, it's the conversations and the listening and the learning that we can do to have it both ways so we can understand better. But I definitely agree that something needs to be done.
Real briefly, Joe.
In addition to looking at the plan that was done, I think, in 2013, we should also be looking at our master plan from 2000. There is two plans, one from 2000, one from 2013. So we should address them both and take a look at what we can do to make amendments or whatever to make this village work and not have vacancies in the middle of June.
Okay. Do we have one last question, and then we'll wrap it up?
Actually, two. They're easy ones, though. First one, back to the vibrancy of the city, of the village. Local governments tend to kick various cans down the road, and therefore you have to play catch up. Would you guys go down, first 100 days in office, one initiative you'd like to ink as it relates to improve the vibrancy of the village? Second of all, Mayor, you mentioned, I think, unless I heard you wrong, 20 new stores are opening and 2 restaurants. Would you please elaborate a little bit about that, if you can? Let's take the first one first, if you would.
Let's actually take the second
okay,
one
fine,
first,
whatever you like.
so that we can let the mayor answer that, and then we'll, because I think your first question is a great one to end on.
You heard me correctly. There's 20 stores that have come in the past month. 2 of those stores, are 2 restaurants, and then 2 health facilities out of the 20. What are they? There's a restaurant that's going in on Elm Street, and there's another restaurant that is going in, I'm trying to remember where it is. I would have to look up where it is, but there is a series of restaurants that are going in. I will tell you. One is in the old post house. Okay, so you got the old post house, you got Elm Street, 2 restaurants, you got 2 health and wellness, and 16 retail. Yeah, I think you have to come to the microphone.
He's
'cause
actually
Charlie-
asking where the retail outlets are.
The retail outlets are between Job's Lane and Main Street. The old facility that everybody was concerned with on Brooks Brothers, all 3 stores are now rented, and a number of new stores have moved into Job's Lane. There is still vacancies down on the end, and Jesse's correct, it's a minimal amount of landlords that do own most of the vacant stores.
Okay, and I would propose that we take the last question and fold it into your final statements. Let's give everybody a chance to give a last statement, but I think as part of your concluding statement, how about giving us one major initiative that you'll tackle in your first 100 days if you're elected? Jesse, you want to start us off? We'll just go left to right.
All right, sounds good. So this is to confirm, this is the conclusion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I would like everybody here tonight to envision a vibrant downtown, a downtown where you can go out and have plenty of choices about where you're going to have your lunch, where you're going to eat, where you can see members of your community and visitors alike present, talking to each other, and participating in green space and an overall sense of vibrancy. I want you to envision businesses like we have in Sag Harbor, like a Buddha Berry coming in and opening up shop. And I want you to envision Nugent Street, which is a dead zone, connecting right into our library, which is just a few hundred meters away, with plantings, maybe with electric charging stations, with the ability to walk right down there and have that library hooked into our community. I also want you to envision a lake that's not neon green, but that looks closer to blue, where Pyrus Concerts Ferry is there, taking our members of our community back and forth to the beach. And I want you to envision a government that you can pick up the phone or send a message on Instagram or Facebook, and we will get back to you quickly, and we'll be able to answer your questions and be able to be there for you. And I want you to envision that on June 21st, because a vote over here is that vision. So I also wanted to thank everybody for being here tonight, and I will pass the microphone over.
Thank you, Jesse. Mayor? And again, try and answer that question as part of your conclusion.
I want to thank you all for coming. It's very important to have you as community individuals in our community to be present and hear what we have to say. We, as a present board and mayor, have a number of actions that were taking place immediately, and some of them on our next meeting. So it's hard to direct them, but I think you need to take a look at what we've done. You need to take a look at that we've made significant inways in the environment. I know Lake Agawam continues to be an issue, but we've addressed a lot of the issues that are causing the problem. And it takes a while to turn around. This isn't an instant world. It's not I know Facebook and Instagram and everything, you think things can happen instantly. It's government. It takes a while to get stuff through, unfortunately. It'd be great if I could dictate and say, I want the lake nice and blue and I want the ferry back in there. Conchas Pyrus, we're in the process. All the lumber that we originally salvaged out of there, it's just going to be a pretty exciting project, is gone back to a warehouse. Items have been picked out, reassembled. It is coming back. We have a foundation going in very shortly. So it will be a proud project to get that finished up. We have the African American Museum in conjunction with that. So we have some great things that are going on in the village that many of you don't realize. We have SAC here. We have SCC, all giving great concerts in the park, organizations. So what I ask is let us continue. I think we did 2 terrific years. I thank all the trustees that were involved. You've done a magnificent job. I thank Nancy McGann and Bill Hattrick for their years of dedication. And hopefully going forward, we can keep our community roots and make sure that the government is done by people who've lived, raised families, such as Mark and the rest of the board here in the village of Southampton. So important. We don't want to lose that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Andrew, and again, remember the first 100 days question.
Yes. Thank you all for being here. Very much appreciated. And many issues were raised today, and there will be many more that come up in the next 2 years if I am elected. And I am excited for the opportunity to represent this village if elected on June 21st. Within the first 100 days, I would love to work with all of the trustees. I'd love to work with the mayor, and I'd love to really, again, start conversations, because it's through those conversations that you can make connections and understand what the problems are, understanding what are the issues for all of the departments that are within the village. Because once you can understand those issues, then you can really start to try and create an action plan on how to move forward on them. And I know that I will be committed to doing this if elected and work for the health and the welfare of the village and all of its constituents and residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Mark?
I'd like to see an event where people can come down and share some experiences through, entertainment, through some type of food options, through, if we can have some of our local business owners come down and get involved, and just really where we can see a lot of the community come down, share something together, and give us that start, and give us that, a hope that, we can go in a direction that's going to be inclusive. I'd like to thank the Southampton Press, the Southampton Association, the Southampton Arts Center for setting us up tonight. I'd also like to thank Bill and Nancy. Bill Hattrick, I've known for most of my life. He's done an incredible job. His fingerprint is on this village, and one day I hope I get the opportunity to maybe, give back a bit like Bill has. Nancy, you've helped make this village beautiful. Really, I walk around and I look at a lot of things, and I'm scared to death that if I do get in, I have to follow that up. A woman's touch is special, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to give back to this community, and honestly, this community has been really good to me since I was a young boy, since my grandparents came here in 1958. This place has shaped me to who I am today. It's taken me in great places, and it's one of the reasons why I came back after college. I want the best option for Southampton to move forward. There's a lot of bright people in this community. There's a lot of talented people, and I really want to tap into that because I think that's important, that we get everybody thinking again, thinking in where we can go, because we do have a lot of unbelievable options ahead of us. I'd like to hear a little bit of why not. Southampton people have told me it's become the village of no. I'd like to say, why not? Change the way we look at things. It's important. I'm 48 years old. I am not a youngster anymore. I want to engage young people. Joe, Jesse, a lot more people out there. Get involved. It's what we're hoping. If we can start to build on some of the things that these administrations have done, and then we can pass them along to younger people to use what they know that they can educate me on, well, that's what it's all about. It's a long-term vision that's moving forward. And finally, I'd like the character, preservation, and charm to be what Southampton always has been. We don't have to change everything. I am in a business that has not changed very much in 61 years. However, I have adapted. An avocado, a Beyond Burger, all these little things make a difference. So let's look at it from a simple point of view, and we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Joe, you want to take us home?
Yes. So a lot was said here tonight, a lot of good stuff, a lot of different ideas. I think it's very important. In my 100 days as trustee, I want to do one thing only. Engage all of you, talk to all of you. What does the public have to say? Because at the end of the day, we work for you. I just want to say, as trustee, I vow to bring a fresh perspective, to be an independent thinker, to engage the public. That's what we're here for. We're not here to make all these crazy laws, or we're here to serve you, and that's the most important thing. And I also would like to give a shout out to Bill and Nancy, who have worked very hard. Bill, for over 30 years, has served this village in his combined tenure on the boards. So he, and also Nancy, with her tenure over almost 15 years, they have served this village very faithfully and very loyally. So they deserve our debt and gratitude. And also I hope I can serve as well as they did, because they did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's have a round of applause for all 5 candidates for being here tonight and the job they did. And to Bark as well, yes. A reminder that the vote will be on June 21st. Okay? All right, I just want to make sure I don't mess that up. Thank you again. At Pond Lane is where the vote will take place. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight sincerely, because I know coming out on a Friday afternoon is a real commitment, and I appreciate it. Thank you to the Arts Center for hosting us. Thank you to the Southampton Association for helping us co-sponsor this, and have a good evening. Thanks for joining us on Facebook Live as well.